Welcome to First But Last, brought to you by the Wyoming Humanities. I am your host, Emmy DeGrappa. Wyoming is called the Equality State because we were the first to give women the right to vote. 150 years later, we wonder what Wyoming women think about the progress toward equality now. Let's find out, and thank you for listening. In this episode, we are talking to Leadership Wyoming Executive Director Mandy Fabel. She has a master's in business administration and has worked for NOLS National Outdoor Leadership School in Lander as a wilderness guide and leadership coach. Welcome, Mandy.
Thank you, Emmy. So glad to be here.
Absolutely. Love talking to you. And just an FYI for everyone that Mandy was in my leadership class. And so hands down, we are the best class, and she's proving it right now. But but what was your journey to Wyoming, Mandy?
Sure. I am not a Wyoming native. I grew up in Sterling, Colorado. So I'd like to say a neighbor of Wyoming, living in a rural agricultural community. Both of my folks worked at a junior college there, and I had a very sort of Wyoming type of lifestyle. I grew up with 5 older brothers and had dirt bikes and boats and all kinds of fun things that we played with out in the country. And from there, I ended up going to undergraduate school at a small school just outside of Los Angeles called Azusa Pacific University, a small Christian liberal arts school there, where I was pole vaulter on the track team and got a double major in business and communications. And then from there, I sort of found myself in this place of knowing that I liked spending time outside. I enjoyed being close to family, and I started thinking about what the next steps would be for me and found myself considering Wyoming as a really wonderful option. And I actually did a NOLS course one summer when I was in college and sort of looked at it as a last big adventure before I became a real adult, which goes to show you that I still haven't taken that step, because it definitely changed my trajectory in that way as I made the decision to start working for NOLS and go to graduate school at the University of Wyoming at the same time. So I moved to Laramie and spent 2 years there getting my master's and falling in love with not only the outdoor opportunities of Wyoming, but also the people of Wyoming. And I just have this really vivid memory of coming back, moving to Wyoming, and feeling like I had come home. And the pace of life and the people and the way people interact was just so refreshing and felt so genuine to me. And so that was a lot of how I settled in Laramie originally, and then found myself 2 years later moving to Lander to continue working for NOLS. And that's where I continue to live today.
Okay. And so you find the outdoors and the people of Wyoming as the most intriguing.
I do.
Yeah. And so, you were just saying that, and I think that's interesting because that's kind of a segue into my question about the fact that we are celebrating Wyoming as the first state to give women the right to vote, and we are called the Equality State. And do you think that is a true statement and depiction of our state for women?
Well, I won't speak on behalf of all women, but I can certainly speak on behalf of myself and my experience. And I have found Wyoming to be a place of a lot of opportunity for women. And maybe just even starting with the adventure and recreation side of things that I'm quite passionate about. The sports that I enjoy are rock climbing and mountain biking and snowmobiling and dirt biking. And in all of these cases, whether it's the rock or the snow or the mountain, doesn't really care if you are a man or a woman. You have to face and overcome the same obstacles. And I think that was a powerful shaping of my own identity as a woman, but as a strong and capable woman, was to be put in challenging outdoor physical environments and learn to trust myself and learn to push myself into those places. And so I think in that sort of rugged landscape sense, and probably in what was much of the decision to become an equity state, I think it gives the opportunity for women to be an equal player in the community and part of the conversation and to share in the work as well. And so that has certainly been my own personal experience in that setting. And then I would say in the professional setting as well, I have felt very fortunate to have professional jobs and jobs that are integrated throughout the entire state at a young age and as a woman. So what would maybe be two strikes against social stereotypes and national considerations, I feel very embraced and afforded the opportunity right here in Wyoming.
Well, I think that's interesting that you point that out because the western states, Wyoming being the first, but I believe it was Colorado, Montana, and Utah were also right there in giving their women the right to vote. And I always think that because you had to be pretty intrepid to move out west and make your life out west, and men and women seemed to like they shared in that life, and it wasn't like about what was going on maybe on the East Coast where women were fighting to have a say.
Sure, maybe a little self-selection bias of the rugged landscape of the state itself. And I think that still holds true. The women I am surrounded by in my own life are very strong, very capable, very hardworking women. And often we choose to live in Wyoming because we want to be here, not because it's the most convenient for our career or for our family or for whatever it may be. And so I think there's something to that by investing in the land and your family and your community, you sort of earn that place to be equal contributors. And I think those are some of my thoughts.
And since you do travel the state and you are doing leadership training in Leadership Wyoming, and you have the opportunity to have discussions, do you have discussions about equality for women in Wyoming? Is that ever an issue or a topic of conversation?
It is a conversation that comes up, and we haven't necessarily made it a standardized part of the curriculum to say, now we will talk about women in leadership. But I think what we end up seeing over the course of the year is examples of phenomenal female leaders across the state, as well as wonderful male leaders. And as you know from your own personal Leadership Wyoming experience, another thing we do is have the opportunity to have respectful dialogue from multiple perspectives. And so as things are in the national spotlight of Me Too or of the wage gap, and these things that can sometimes be hard to discuss across, neighbors' fences or city hall rooms or boardrooms, I think Leadership Wyoming affords the opportunity to have those conversations in a meaningful and respectful way. And what we strive to do is create the conditions so that those conversations can happen in a healthy fashion. And so we do have conversations come up about, is it harder for a woman to step into a leadership role, whether it's at the local level, the state level, the national level? Are there ways that men and women lead differently? And as you know, we do a personality inventory that helps people identify their own style. And sometimes there's trends among the women and the men, and sometimes there aren't. And it sort of depends on the makeup of the class. But I think we try really hard to have genuine, authentic conversations. And so this is often a thread of those conversations.
How about discussing the #MeToo movement? Is that something that is discussed at Leadership Wyoming? Is it contentious to talk about it?
Sure. We have not had it as a major dialogue or sort of topic of discussion in this year's class. We did have a conversation in last year's class about this same time of year that came up of understanding what does the path look like for women to be leaders, and is it more difficult? And if so, is that okay? And we actually had some women say, I think that's okay. I had to earn my place in a leadership position, and I'm okay with other women having to do the same. And we had men say, I have daughters, and I want my daughter to have an equal opportunity for success to my sons, and I want that to be true for Wyoming. And so I think we see a lot of different perspectives. I wouldn't say we spend much time debating sort of the merits of the national movement or the conditions of it. But I think, as with most topics, we try to look at what's the local application and what can we as leaders do to make our state and our communities a better place to live and to have families and to develop our economy as well. And then the other thing I'll say in that same vein is we need everyone in Wyoming. And I think there's a place for everyone in Wyoming. And so I think to the extent that people want to step into leadership roles, there are opportunities for men and women in that way. And so that's maybe a little more subtle than just putting a hashtag Me Too movement on the front of the page. But I think that's where we sort of see how we can shape and influence our own leadership as well.
Right, because we have such a small population. What do they say? Wyoming is one big community with a really long street.
Yeah, that is a common saying around the state, which I think rings true. And I think Leadership Wyoming sort of demonstrates that as well, as we realize our communities are often struggling with many of the same challenges as each other, and we can work together on those.
And so what is your vision on some things that you would like to see happen for Leadership Wyoming in the future?
Sure, that's a good question. Our goal for Leadership Wyoming really is to build strong leaders to lead our state forward. And so I'm fortunate to have inherited a wonderful program from Bill Schilling that was built on many of those tenets and has a strong reputation throughout the state. We now have over 800, I should say we will have in May, over 800 alumni of the program who are leading the state forward in some pretty powerful ways. And even in the last year, we've seen current class members and alumni step into important roles in state government, in local government, national government. And so our job, as we see it, is to keep doing that, to keep building leaders who are willing to step forward and work through challenging issues and ask tough questions and be kind and compassionate and help find solutions for Wyoming. And so part of that is just staying relevant to what Wyoming needs. And what Wyoming needed 20 years ago might look different than what Wyoming needs today, and certainly from what Wyoming needs 20 years from now. But I think there are some threads of what we think leaders can help to do in this state and encouraging them. And this is a place I actually do think I see a little bit of a difference in men and women and how they lead. I think there's some statistics around this that I don't have off the top of my head, but just even in running for political office, women tend to take a lot more encouragement from their friends and respected colleagues and peers to take that step than a man who maybe one or two people say, hey, you should think about running for mayor, or hey, have you considered this position? That men might be more likely to step into that. And so I think it doesn't have to be a political position, but I think that's a place that we as Leadership Wyoming can encourage men and women to step into those leadership roles and to have the support network to help carry them through. Christy Racines is a great example as our new Wyoming State Auditor. She announced her campaign to run just as the Leadership Wyoming class was winding down last May. And that network of people from all over the state, from all walks of life and industries and political affiliations, got behind her because they believed in her and what she was capable of doing. And I think that's a testament to what we want to do in Leadership Wyoming, and not just at the state government level, but even for a local leadership role on a PTA or stepping up in a church or in your own family. And so I think that's a place Leadership Wyoming does serve women incredibly well in offering that support network and resources.
Right. That was an excellent explanation. I feel like what I would love to see happen is that we find more ways to work together in Leadership Wyoming and support each other, even though we're not in the same class. And I don't know how that would work, but I just think because so many fantastic people have gone through the program, and it's nice to have kind of that bond, like you said, you know, even if you're running for office, male or female, that people can get behind you and support you.
Yeah. This last week we were in Sheridan, and an alumni from one of the earlier classes was telling me that she thought after her class went through, she thought, how will they find more people to do this program? You know, we're the third or fourth class and they've already engaged all of Wyoming's leaders. And she told me, she said, every year I come to this reception and I meet these incredible people and I think, wow, there are even more great leaders out there. And so we sort of smiled over that idea that there are no more good leaders. And really our job is to help grow people to be the best leader that they can be. And sometimes just having that 9 months to reflect on themselves and have honest feedback and honest conversation, and also to realize that, you know, problems aren't going to solve themselves for Wyoming. If someone's going to do it, it's going to be because someone in the state or stepped up and took on a leadership role. And so that's really what we hope to do in the years moving forward, is to share the challenges facing Wyoming and look at things from different perspectives, but also to really challenge people to step up and make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. And that was going to be my last question regarding stepping up, because I think our state is facing some challenges, especially when people talk about economic diversification. What are kind of the conversations that the class is having around that subject?
Sure. So we do a lot to visit different industries around Wyoming, from going in coal and trona mines to talking about education and nonprofits, and also spending time down at the legislature. And I think it's nebulous and it's complicated, as anyone who dives into economic diversification knows. And there are different metrics for how you measure success. You know, a small town may measure success as, are all the buildings on Main Street full? Do we have a full downtown? And another community may measure success as, do my children have a place to come home and work if they want to live in Wyoming? And we know that in Cheyenne, we measure success as, can we build a budget that meets the needs of the people of Wyoming? And can we sustain the expenses that we're committing to for education and state agencies and the myriad of public service that gets provided in the state? And so I think that's where the complicating factors come in. It's sometimes those measures of success may be at odds, that adding jobs in one town may not be adding to state revenue. And oftentimes it's not adding to state revenue. And so as we go throughout the year, we sort of look at those questions, and we're not writing legislation and we're not advocating for certain things, but we're just understanding the complexities of the state that we live in and how our budget works. And I think it helps us to be more aware citizens of what's happening in Wyoming, to know we have a boom-bust economy, and we've lived through many of those booms and also those busts, and to be thinking about what would a more balanced economy look like from a local perspective and also from a state perspective. And I would say from my many years of living in this existence, there's probably not a silver bullet to that. And if there was, we would have probably already figured it out. And we're lucky to be in a place where we have had some reserves that the state has been able to utilize and continue to offer great services across the state. And we've continued to have little injections of industry and extraction booms that maybe we didn't expect, or gas comes back a little stronger than we thought. And those hopefully will continue to happen in this state. But just by being more informed, I think it helps us have a lot better dialogue and start to think about solutions moving forward.
Wow, you're doing such great work, Mandy. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Aw, thanks, Emmy. Thanks for having me, and thanks for highlighting some amazing women across the state. I know there's a lot of great examples out there.
Thank you for listening to First But Last, brought to you by the Wyoming Humanities. Please join us again next week as we continue our conversations with women from around the state. You can also find us at thinkwy.org, where we continue the conversation on our blog about the history, journey, and the challenges of Wyoming's intrepid women living in the Equality State. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review on iTunes. Thank you for listening.